Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, book review. So this is part of the scripted book review series in which I kind of go through my old blog posts and try and turn some of these old written book reviews into video reviews. I mentioned at the very first video when I started doing this that some of these weren't all that great, but I've got this quirk. I'm a completist. I hate to leave anything out. So I'm going to kind of try and go through all of them anyways, but this is the one of the ones that's really not that great because I don't really say anything much in the review. But for whatever it's worth, I'll just read through this. It says, recently a friend in Japan gave me a copy of Kurt Vonnegut's Galapagos and insisted that I read it. I had every intention of just pretending to read it. I don't always appreciate it when people kind of give me books and say, here, read this. Because like, I can be a slow reader. It takes me forever to get through something. And I've got my own stack of kind of books on my own reading list that I've been meaning to work through. But somehow I found myself reading the first few lines. I just opened up the book and looked at the first few lines. And then I was hooked. So after reading and enjoying Galapagos, I wanted to read something else by the same author. I figured Slaughterhouse-Five was the most famous thing that Kurt Vonnegut had ever written, but I was unable to get a hold of a copy in Japan. But when I was back in the US for the holidays, I was able to buy a copy at the local bookstore and I read it. And yeah, I've just got to say it's a really good read. Now, it's been called the greatest anti-war novel ever written. I forgot where I got that from. It was probably on like the book cover. Now, at this point, I'm in no point to agree or disagree with that statement. I mean, I haven't read all the anti-war books out there, so how am I to know which one is the greatest? But it was really good. So, for whatever it's worth, it is my recommendation. So go ahead and add it to the long list of books that you've been planning to read. And that's all I wrote, right? That's not very informative at all. This was 2004 when I read it. I have in the years since re-listened to it on audiobook. So it's not completely faded in my memory. I can still remember many parts of the books, and I could maybe talk about some of the plot relatively intelligently, maybe. And I was originally thinking about doing that, like, because this is so short and, you know, I've already got the camera on anyways, just kind of adding some other stuff I remembered. But it's one of those books that you don't really want to spoil too much. In fact, you don't really want to spoil anything. There's a lot of clever stuff going on in the book, but like it would just ruin it for me to start talking about it. John Green over at Crash Course Literature does kind of a nice video review of it, and I'll link to that in the description down below if you want that kind of thing, to somebody to kind of take you through the plot of the book and tell you what the themes are. But I recommend reading this book cold if you haven't read it already. Just pick it up, don't read anything about it, because to talk about it too much before you've read it is just going to spoil kind of all the clever stuff that's going on there. So, it's got my recommendation. Definitely worth checking out. Don't read anything about it beforehand.